Okay, so we're fixing this iPhone 8 today. It's just a charge port. So basically the customer brought this in, thought it was dirty, and it was. You can see even these speakers here are very dirty. But if you look, it's so loose. So the charge port inside is actually damaged. There's two little pieces of metal on the side of the charge port that kind of clip in right here and there. And sometimes as the port starts to age, the little pieces of metal that help hold the cable in, kind of hold it in place, start to fail. So not only is it loose, but most likely there's another issue with one of the actual pins on that port not allowing it to make a connection. So we tried to clean it and it still wasn't taking a charge. So we're just going to replace the port for him now. Push that back because that actually holds the board in. You don't have to take everything out here for the board, but I want to take a few of these screws out just because it does make it easier. You don't want to take chances. You don't want to bend this board. So I just like to take a few of these screws out here. There's a hidden screw back there. Okay. That's all I have to do for the board. And I just do that so that I can kind of lift this a little, push this up out of the way here. There we go, that's out. Boom. Get this. There we go. Moving right along here. Get this Taptic engine out of here. Okay, just a couple more screws here. Put this one on my third mat. going to need this little part on the new charge port, so make sure you get that. I can't tell you how many times I've taken this port out. Forgot that. Fortunately, when you're reconnecting the new charge port, you'll always be reminded that you need it, but once you go to put everything back together, you'll see it's not there, but it's easy to forget. Had to grab that back out of the trash can a few times off the old charge port. Okay, so now everything, all the screws are now out. So we'll be able to get this charge port the rest of the way out here. Sometimes you got to be careful with these ports if you're going to be reinstalling it, if you're doing a housing swap or something like that, but we know this port's bad. We know we're just getting rid of it, so be a little more aggressive with the port itself. Doesn't really matter. When you pull this out here, it is adhered down here, and I used to heat these up, but I've just done so many at this point. Just use a little isopropyl. You don't want this board to be bent up too much, just kind of angled. When you pull that out, you want to make sure you don't hit this battery connector and damage that. Old port's out. Let's grab our new port here. Look at our little book, iPhone 8 parts. Here we go. A few pieces of plastic here, just covering up this adhesive. There's just adhesive on the back because you want this to really stick in place once it's installed. Okay. Port's ready to go here. You know, I used to test this port before I would install it, which means I would kind of do what I'm doing here, but I wouldn't take that blue plastic off first. But it's just so unlikely that I'm going to have an issue with these parts from this supplier. I've just done so many of these and not had an issue. Which means because I'm saying this now, I'm sure I'll have an issue, the first one in a long time. But no, honestly, you know, taking that time to test it and then having to kind of take that charge port kind of back out to take the plastic off so it adheres, it was beginning to, you know, actually take more time doing that and testing it than if I just install it, at least like to this point, and then test it here. Because I can test it now. It's adhered, but what I'll do is I'll just pop the screen on quick. I don't have to plug that camera in yet because it doesn't matter. So we'll just pop this on. Boom, boom. Battery plugged in. And then we won't even hit the power button. Let's just plug it right in. You have to hold this because it'll push it away because there's no screws in. Plugged in. Now let's see, it should be coming right on. Bang. There we go. Powering right up here. Let's just make sure nothing looks weird when it comes on. Let's make sure it comes on. Oh. It's always worrisome when you see it doing a boot loop like that. But in this case, it was just because the battery wasn't plugged in and just the charge port was. So it won't start up. If you just have the charge port plugged in and you plug the lightning cable into a charge port with no battery, it's always going to do that. So you have to have a battery installed for these phones to start up. Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, disconnect everything. Get this screen back out of here, and we'll finish this up here quick. Okay. Okay, one mat of screws out of the way. Okay, let's get the secret screw back in up here. Get everything back in this board. As always, make sure this foam is not blocking any of the connectors here. Sometimes that gets moved around, especially after you take that screw out that was hidden. And then if you go to plug this camera or the screen back in and that foam is blocking and gets into one of those connectors, those components will not work properly. And the customer will not like that. Okay. Remember this guy, if we can get it. Okay, that little connection is always a little pain, but just so small. So, but we got it. No worries. And what makes it even harder is doing this repair the way that I'm doing it, because what you can't see but is that this camera is actually on a little recording. I don't know what we call it. Today's my first day using a recording harness. It's a little, basically a necklace with a uh, magnetic phone holder on the end of it. So you're just kind of seeing my POV here. I guess I should have waited, as always, to put this stuff back in until I put this back in, because you kind of got to slide this under there, but it's not a big deal. Okay. All right, just a few more screws here, and we are good to go. Just know that the iPhone 8, which is what this phone is, charge port, is way easier than the charge port on the new phones. I have a video I'll post soon of some of the newer phones I've done charge ports on. I have a huge backlog of videos right now I'm trying to get ready to be published on YouTube, but I have some videos of me doing like a 14 Pro Max charge port, I think a 15 Pro charge port, 15 Pro housing, and those charge ports have so many screws, and Apple made it way more difficult with those charge ports. It's just there's so many different screws and little places that you kind of got to keep all these little parts kind of lined up exactly where they go, and if not, it gets very confusing very quickly. So, and it doesn't really matter how many times you do it. I guess to some extent it does. I mean, obviously it gets a little easier, but it's just there's so many screws that if one of them gets kind of bumped on your mats, or I know a lot of people use these numbers here, just easier for me to use the mats and kind of put them in the layout that they were in. But if one of the screws gets bumped when you're doing one of the newer phones, your mat gets bumped and the screws kind of get out of alignment, it can be a real mess. So it's really tough then to like figure out which screw went where sometimes. You just got to be very disciplined about how you set those screws up and kind of how you take it apart, line everything up, and then just, just kind of keep track of that when you put it back together. So right now we're just cleaning this old adhesive off the edge of this metal housing. A lot of places do not replace this adhesive. That's so common that shops don't replace this adhesive seal, which helps keep dirt and dust out of the phone and just helps, keep the phone clean inside and keep a nice, um, even, clean seal on the edge. A lot of places do not replace this. It costs pennies. I mean, each of these probably, depending on where you get your screen, you get the adhesive for free. I know we're not doing a screen today, but anyway, when we get phones in from other shops, I'd say 9.9 times out of 10, they didn't replace the adhesive, which is just, kind of a running theme, not only with the adhesive, but just a lot of shops really like to take the easy way out with a lot of repairs. So once we get it cleaned off the actual frame of the housing, now we clean the rest of the adhesive off the frame of the screen. And again, does it take a couple extra minutes? Sure does. But we want to do the repair the right way. My goal whenever I'm doing a repair is to get the phone as close back to its factory settings as we can. So Okay, now we just need this adhesive. Get that lined up. Press it down all the way around. I like to use this plastic tool to just press it against nice and hard, because if you don't, okay, got a customer coming there, but we're back. Get this plastic off the seal. We're almost finished here. Almost finished before that stoppage, but not quite. All right, now just want to try to clean this out a little bit for him. Nasty, huh? Okay. Okay. That's that. iPhone 8 charge port repair complete.